we decided that we would form this group, Next Economy North Bay, and we would really focus on the implementation of sort of sustainable practices and green practices rather than just talking about the benefits. And often a lot of those green groups, everybody was pretty much like-minded anyways, and we were preaching sort of to the choir and not really preaching to the community, which is where it needed to go. So that was really the basis of the symposium that we ran last fall, was to kind of make an announcement to our community that we're here and that we're anxious to actually start implementing these things, not just talk about them.
Yeah, and you actually, part of that was with one of my colleagues currently, Simon Blakely was part of that, and just an incredibly passionate guy about environmentalism and sustainability. So I like this thought that you heard these conversations and you were tired of nothing being done about them. So what does the Next Economy North Bay group actually do? What does it mean? What is its purpose?
Well, I think we tossed around the idea of how we were going to name the group, and we specifically chose not to include green or sustainable in the name of the group, because just to differentiate a little bit. And I think, you know, some of the mainstream people, when they hear the word green or sustainable, all of a sudden they just tune out. And we don't want them to tune out. We need them to be fully engaged, and people understand things about the economy, understand that there is a transition that's occurring here, and we want to try to be ahead of the curve a little bit if we can, rather than be behind. So that's why we called it Next Economy North. Really a wholesale change in how we do business, how our communities function, the whole bit. Not just protesting events and stuff like that, like a lot of the green organizations had done in the past.
So when so you want to see change, you know the economy's changing to a green scenario. What sort of things do you advocate for to the businesses to get on board with this green movement in North Bay? And why is it important that this take place?
I think it's really important for every community to be basically trying to lead. We all know these changes are coming up, whether we like it or not. And you can choose to sit back and wait until things are mandated or you're forced to comply with certain things. Or you can get ahead of the curve and be the first of the crop and say, no, we're going to take this on now and we're going to be prepared for these changes that come. We're going to try to be ahead of everybody else. So I think that was really sort of, you know, how we saw the community of North Bay getting ahead. And there are some certain subject areas that we more recently trying to go on.
Rod, I'm going to have to stop you there. Your audio is really starting to cut out. I might have you phone into the line. Is that okay? Just because I guess the internet connection is a bit jaunty, as it were. I don't know if we still have Rod with us.
I believe your theory was just proven.
Oh no, it's a shame. I was liking where the conversation was going. So just to recap, everyone, we were talking about Next Economy North Bay, and the value of understanding the economy is going to be transitioning to an environmental sustainability focus, and it's time to take action and do something. Now, Rod, I don't know if you want to just use audio only. Maybe that'll help with the internet connection. Not that I don't.
Let's try that.
Oh, there we go. Super clear. All right. That's super easy. Not that I don't love seeing your face. We'll just have to find an excuse to meet for a coffee soon and talk about the potential when we can travel to North Bay a little more freely. All right. So let's start that again. So what's why is it important? We kind of lost it a bit there.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. So I think the reason why we thought it was important is that a lot of these changes we know are going to come, whether we like it or not. And we can either sit back as a community and wait until we're legislated to make those changes or mandated to make those changes, which puts us at a disadvantage. So it seems to make sense to be prepared for those changes to come and be there ahead of the curve and take advantage of a lot of these things, because there's going to be a lot of economic opportunities that are generated as a result of these changes that are coming. And we need to be able to communicate that to the broader audience so that they understand that this is not a bad thing. This is actually going to be a good thing, and it will create a bunch of opportunities that we haven't seen before.
Absolutely. I like that. Let's do it before we're legislated to make that change. You want to get the jump on that because we know that the green economy is going to be really sustainably focused going forward. So what kind of changes are you encouraging businesses to make? And is this just a business focused movement?
It's certainly tied heavily to the economy just because so many things are anyways. One of the things, we talked recently about maybe some focus areas that we wanted to kind of work towards. And so there was three main pillars that we've been talking about. One of them was being food security. And surprisingly, that really came to the forefront once the COVID-19 situation occurred and people realize that the security of our food supplies are not as good as we thought. When we see things like large meat packing plants in the U.S. that supply, 80 or 90% of the meat that you see in the grocery stores, all of a sudden that's in peril, and people start to panic, thinking, okay, where do I get my food from now if those supplies are gone? So there's been a huge resurgence here locally in local farms and people making the connection with those local farms and starting to purchase and source their food from those areas because it's more reliable. We know where it comes from. It's more predictable. And when events like this happen, you don't have to worry about, long distances, bringing food in from long distances away. So we've really seen, things like ClickFork, which is an online service where you can purchase products directly from a series of farmers, actually in the Sudbury West Nipissing area for the most part. That saw a huge uptick. And also shortly thereafter, like literally within the last 2 weeks, just south of North Bay, Powassan is a fairly large agricultural community, and they've done a very similar thing in creating what they call the Great Powassan Farm Stand Tour, where they're bringing their produce to the end of the road at their farms, having a little farm stand set up. It's all within a 30-kilometer radius, and the intent is that you can, instead of going to the grocery store and spending an hour in the grocery store, spend an hour in your vehicle and stop at each one of these farms, pick up your food items that you would normally do your shopping from, and buy them from a local supplier. And it's been hugely successful, hugely successful. So that was food security, definitely is one of them.
We actually spent a bit of time talking about food security earlier today, and I'm really glad you brought up food security as a concept because it sounds like you're taking a real community approach to food security. And Next Economy North Bay is encouraging people to buy local. And do you think buying local will help reduce sort of a carbon footprint and helping increase sustainability of the community?
Absolutely. When you start looking at labels, especially produce, where that produce comes from, we quickly realize that most of our food is not local. Even when there's, like when the strawberry harvest is ongoing in our area, are not from here at all. They're coming from California and stuff like that. And it kind of makes you question, like, why are we buying stuff from so far away when we have products right here locally? So I think people are paying attention to a lot more now than they used to. And I think this is a really good time to really try to expand that network and make it more mainstream.
The Next Economy North Bay has brought together some ideas and some people and some concepts. What's the next steps for this movement that you've started? You held your event in the fall last year. It was amazing. What's the next? So you want to keep this momentum. What's the next step for you guys?
Well, I think we definitely want to do another event, but we don't want to discourage people doing basically the same thing that we did before. We need to bring it to the next level. And like I mentioned, there was a few different pillars that we were looking at. Security is one that's kind of happening organically, whether we help it along or not. The other one is green building technology. We live in Northern Ontario, and heating and cooling is a huge expense and has a fairly large carbon footprint in Northern Ontario as well. So there's a huge opportunity here for making Northern Ontario like a leader in green building technology. And there's been leaps and bounds there in that particular arena. And the costs of building these types of like net zero and net zero ready homes now has come down to the point where when you include the operational cost of the home and the purchase cost, it's actually cheaper to be buying these homes. And it makes a lot of sense because the building code is heading in that direction. And you can either wait 10 years down the road when you have to build that, or you can build it right now. And we want to see it happening right.
Sorry, I was on mute. I really love this concept that I'm hearing, that all Next Economy North Bay is all about let's do now what we're going to have to do later. So let's get that jump on that as a community. It sounds like you guys are looking for opportunities to get the jump on these things. And that's great to see. What's been the community response to your efforts so far to get people to start thinking about the next economy?
I think there's a really good, solid nucleus within the community that's expanding. Certainly, when we had the event last year, we had speakers that said to us, "I normally don't speak at these type of events anymore because I'm kind of tired of preaching the same old song and nothing ever happens." Yet they said there was something different about this, that we kind of felt that this was actually sort of on the cusp of actually doing something and actually seeing this become a more mainstream type of thing. So we were really encouraged to hear that, because that's exactly what we were aiming for. And we want to kind of continue down that road. So we've been exploring some ideas. There's a couple of builders in Southern Ontario that recently built entire communities of net zero homes. And these homes were sold out immediately, which was confirming what we thought was true, that there is a demand for this, does make sense. And in fact, it makes even more sense in Northern Ontario than it does in Southern Ontario. So we're trying to attract this particular builder to come up and do a workshop. I'm also a member of the Ontario Home Builders Association, and local small home builders are struggling to compete with the big guys. And we thought this is a great opportunity to give you an upper hand on some of the bigger developers, because you can now offer a completely different product that they don't deliver right now. And you don't have to be so competitive on price anymore, because now you're delivering a different product altogether. So we're hopeful that we can get something like that lined up as part of the whatever we do this fall, to do like a really practical workshop that people can use and make use of, and we'll really see some changes occur.
So it sounds like part of the movement is also empowering individuals to be able to make change, not just encouraging them, but sharing that information. And I love the idea that you're sharing. You want to help try to share this sort of sustainable home building, net zero home building. The Greater Sudbury right now, and obviously we're a hop, skip, and an hour and a half drive away, but our community is pushing for a net zero by 2050. Does your city, does the community, are they thinking like that for a community-wide initiative? And do you think that's something Next Economy North Bay might find attractive to grow to?
There's, I think, I'm not sure whether from a city's perspective, whether that's a real priority right now, but there is a group of 2 or 3 smaller developers within North Bay that are definitely interested in that aspect. And one in particular has a project on hand right now that is a condominium project, but the main floor will all be commercial space. And his vision for this is that these would be those specialty kind of companies and suppliers that would provide all of the things that we need to have in Northern Ontario to produce net zero homes and energy efficient homes with all of the technology and supplies right here in Northern Ontario, and be like a real showcase for Northern Ontario. And I think it's a great idea. It's something that can set our identity apart from other places. And I think the time is here.
I think the time is. Sorry, go on. So, Mark. Go on, Mark.
Sorry, Dave. What kind of things go into a net zero home, and like, what does it mean to like have a net zero home or be a net zero home?
Well, I mean, what a net zero home really means is that you take a look at energy loss within the envelope of the construction itself, and you minimize that as much as possible. So a typical house that's built to the current code today is not particularly airtight. It's not particularly well insulated, even though we kind of tend to think that it is. We can do a way better job with modern materials than we've done in the past. So you try to reduce that energy requirement by somewhere between 70 and 80%, which seems like a lot, but it's actually very attainable and not that difficult to do these days. And then the net zero part of it is you try to reduce that energy as much as possible. And then the little bit that you still require, you use some sort of renewable energy component to the house, usually solar, to make up the difference of that. So essentially your house runs with no energy requirements at all. It produces as much or more than it actually requires to operate. And although that seems like unreal in Northern Ontario, it's absolutely attainable. And quite honestly, we have actually really good solar radiation in Northern Ontario. Even though we think it's cold, it's not the cold part, it's how much sunlight we get. And we get a lot, more so than other places that you would think has better solar energy. So it's certainly attainable, and it would be a huge benefit here because heating costs are a huge cost in Northern Ontario.
That's
You
kind
talked
of
to
what I want to have when I'm older and I can afford a house.
I think that's an age joke towards me. Mark's been hacking at me all day for being older than him. So that's actually.
Can I just share one thing here? Because
Yeah.
I talked with the builder that I was talking about. It's actually in Elora where they built this community. And before they started into it, they had a community engagement session where they brought people in, told them what they were planning to do with these net zero homes, because they wanted to gauge, is there really a market for this, or is this a bad idea? And they assumed that people would do it or would be in favor of it because it would be a cost savings, or the cool factor, basically be able to say that I live in a net zero home, that was going to be the real selling features. And they were pleasantly surprised to find out that was not the case with most of the customers. They all were looking at it and saying, this is the future. This is where the Ontario Building Code is going to be 20 or 30 years down the road. I'm doing this as an investment because if I buy this house now, it's going to meet the future codes and it's going to retain or gain value over top of homes that are built the traditional way. So we see it as a huge investment opportunity, which was interesting.
I really do like that logic that it is an investment opportunity. We were talking with someone earlier about solar panels and how that's an investment opportunity as well. So once again, the name Next Economy North Bay really does really hit the nail on the head about what's coming down the line. Like this infrastructure piece, our home infrastructure piece is huge, and it plays a huge role in this net zero process, doesn't it?
Absolutely, for sure it does.
So let's talk about sort of this movement you've built in the community to empower individuals and bring people together to educate them on this. What is your goal? What's the goal for this group 5 years from now? Do you guys know? Because you've started something, you've created something, and is it Frankenstein's monster, or is it something that you're just gonna keep going 5 years down the line and have a vision for?
Well, surprisingly enough, I'm also the chairperson for the Active Transportation Committee. And somebody asked me, what's the overall goal here? What are you trying to do? Mm-hmm. And, I really thought about it, and it's really along the exact same lines as Next Economy North Bay, is to bring all of this stuff into the mainstream so that it no longer seems like something that costs extra or it's an extra or a nice thing to do. It's the way we do business. It's just the normal way we do business. And I said, with active transportation, I hope we don't even have an active transportation committee in 5 years, because we've institutionalized it within the city structure that's just part of doing business. That's what we do. And I feel kind of the same way about Next Economy North Bay, that if we start to institutionalize those changes in how we build better homes, more green, sustainable things, we increase food security, that eventually that will just become, that's the way we do it. That's the way we should have always been doing it. And there won't be a need for an advocacy group to try to push these agendas along. It'll just happen organically. So I think that's the long-term vision. It sounds kind of self-defeating, like we create this great group and then we just disband it when we no longer need it. But that's really cool.
I think that's a great goal, to not be needed. I think that's pretty dang admirable, and I hope you guys achieve it one day. Not that I don't like you, but I hope you guys solve all the problems. Climate change right out of North Bay. Let's talk about that active transportation piece, because I think part of a healthy community, including the vision of Next Economy North Bay, active transportation, I think needs to be part of the discussion, and I think you agree with that.
Yeah, it's a really key component. From a number of aspects, and we've looked really carefully at the finances of running a city, and recognizing that there's a lot of Ontario, especially Northern Ontario cities, that are in financial trouble right now. One, we see some shrinking population, which means it reduces the tax base. Two, we're spread out. We have a lot of roads. We have a lot of services that are spread out, and it's expensive to maintain and replace. And we have downtown cores that have kind of been neglected for a number of years, and with lots of vacant space and underutilized or underpurposed buildings and structures. So there's a huge opportunity now to intensify the use in the core of our northern cities, and basically capitalize on the infrastructure that's already there rather than building new infrastructure to service new buildings. So there is a movement, certainly within North Bay, and I think other places as well, where smaller developers are looking at buildings and properties in the downtown cores that can be repurposed and provide a better tax base to the city of North Bay in this case, but any other city. And active transportation is a key component, because if you're going to attract businesses and residents to a downtown core, if they can walk or cycle to all of the services that they need in a nice, neat radius, that eliminates a huge cost in that having a car and maintaining roads and stuff like that. So there's a real benefit, a real cost benefit, and a real attraction for especially the younger generation to not have a car, work and live in a very close proximity and have everything close by. And it makes sense. It makes sense. We've kind of lost sight of it, but it makes a lot of sense.
Now, North Bay has a gorgeous downtown, as is. We've talked about that. I love the North Bay downtown. I love downtowns in general, frankly. I think it's the heart of any community is your downtown core. So I'm really sensing that there's a connection. A healthy downtown, a sustainable downtown creates profit and then helps the city overall. Is it safe to say that connection from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we don't do a very good job of understanding how important downtowns are for communities. And I did present this to some of the councillors. We have some fairly new commercial development that is more in the outskirts of the city, that's all been built up in the last 5 to 10 years. And I took a look at the tax revenues generated from these new commercial buildings on a square meter basis. And they generate about $12 per square meter to the city of North Bay in tax revenues. And then we look at the downtown, which has been neglected for years. There's lots of vacant properties. Some of them are not in the best condition. So when you look at it, you can't imagine that there's a huge contribution. But those buildings in the downtown core are actually contributing somewhere between $35 and $45 a square meter. So more than triple what these brand new commercial developments that we're all excited about. And yet really the income generation is not coming from there. It's coming from the downtown core. So anything that we build there that improves that tax generation and makes better use of that land is a pure bonus for the cities.
Wow, that is a stat. And I love that stat because you're right. We get excited for the new big box stores. We get excited for these new big complexes. And not that they're all awful. I'm not saying that. I mean, they have their place. But we don't realize how much profit the whole city benefits from these downtown areas. Mark, if I could toss it over to you. We're talking about a walkable space, a bikeable space. You and I earlier today talked about biking. Since you're a youth, as we've determined from many of our conversations, how important to you is a walkable, bikeable space as you, as a younger individual, spend your money?
Well, I mean, if I'm walking, I'm really not spending money there. But if there's things to do, I think people my age, you just want things to do. We try not to spend too much money, but some of us are really bad at it. And I think a downtown core where like there's a lot of centralized stuff for somebody to do, like Sudbury kind of has Bell Park downtown. It has restaurants. It has, if you want to go dancing, there's a whole nightlife. Like it's a very walkable space, which kind of like helps you wanting to go there. I think it is pretty important to people that you can walk places, because spending so much money on just having to park on the side of the road is kind of a deterrent, especially when there's a pretty populated downtown core and there's not enough parking and you have to end up parking somewhere far away and then walking anyway. It still ends up being important if you're someone who'll go out to the downtown area.
Rod, what's the return on that? So you've been looking at downtowns and you're talking about active transportation. So the issue of parking is it active transportation mean less parking and more walkable, or the harmony between the two?
There's definitely a harmony between the two, but quite honestly, we have far more parking than we ever need. And over the years, planning departments have required that there's a minimum amount of parking for certain types of developments. So we've accumulated tons and tons and tons of parking. And 90% of it is all targeted on peak parking requirements, which means we're reserving huge tracts of land to park a vehicle on for those 1 or 2 times when it's really, really busy. And one of the things that one of the organizations that I follow really closely is Strong Towns in the U.S. And they've got some really good programming. And one of the things they do is every year they do it on Black Friday, because Black Friday is a huge event in the U.S. But it's also becoming pretty huge in Canada now too. We've kind of taken it on as our own. That that's the big Christmas shopping days and stuff like that. They literally have a bunch of volunteers across the country to go out and look at parking lots, municipal and shopping plazas and stuff like that on Black Friday, which they've pegged as the busiest shopping day of the year, and see what kind of use is actually occurring in these parking lots. And it's shocking that if that's the busiest day of the year, and yet a lot of these parking lots are only at 50%. And I did it 2 years ago here in North Bay because I was also interested. And at the main mall here, where there's a large parking area, but there's also like a 5-level parking garage as well. The upper 2 or 3 levels of that garage, there wasn't even a single car in it, and this is like the busiest day of the year. So it just seems like such a horrendous waste of valuable space for that 1 or 2 days that's really busy. And if it's that empty on the busiest day, you can imagine that on a normal day, 50% of these parking areas are just wasted space. And active transportation eliminates the need for all that reserved space for parking, and you can turn it into something that becomes a tax benefit to the city, and it also becomes a community benefit because you can turn it into something that's more useful to the community than just a parking lot.
I really like this logic. Mark, did you have something to say on that? Sorry?
No, I was just saying that's like a really good point. If you're not using the space, it's just wasted space.
Yeah, exactly. And it's probably also wasted space that needs to be maintained like a road, right? Which means salts and chemicals and that sort of thing, as opposed to a green space or a walking path or that sort of thing. So I imagine that would also generate less chemicals going into the waterbed or going into the watershed, sorry, of the local area if it was more green and active spaces.
Yeah, for sure. There's an environmental component to it. And you're right. If you looked at the money that's generated from a parking space, and a lot of people think, well, it doesn't cost that much to operate. A little bit of painting lines, and you have to shovel or do snow removal. But eventually, that pavement has to be replaced, and that's a big expense. And the monies that are generated from parking, it's tough to make a go of it, to make it a profitable thing. But in a downtown core where property and space is at a premium, to use it for parking is really kind of wasteful. And I just wanted to say about what Mark was saying, because he was talking about the younger generation, and we don't want to spend a lot of money. So yeah, we might congregate downtown, but maybe we don't buy anything. There's an intangible benefit that goes with that we don't consider. And businesses and young entrepreneurs collaborate. And if we don't give a place where they can do that kind of collaboration, we miss out on all kinds of ideas that could come together. So downtown space that people want to be in, that they visit their friends and meet new people and other businesses, that's where all those business transactions and ideas occur, in those park spaces, or an art exhibit or something like that. And those are the intangible things that we don't often think about, but they're so important in generating new businesses in a small community.
I never really thought of that before. That's great. Is there also something between the wage disparity between owning a car and not owning a car? Because there's a cost to owning a car, absolutely. Gas, insurance, whatnot. And if we made the space more walkable, does it then make it more accessible to everybody, or does it make it biased against those who do or do not have cars? Like, what's the benefit there?
I don't think there's really a bias. I mean, sometimes I keep saying, am I a hypocrite for wanting to do all these things because I drive? And I think, you know what? Most people do all of these things. We all drive. We all take transit or bus or whatever at some point in time. We all maybe ride a bike. We all walk. So I don't think it's biased or whatever. I think it just evens the scale a little bit. And I think one of the things that occurred with me recently, actually it was last year, I'm one of the board members with Discovery Route Sales Organization, and we ran a program for the last few years now. It's called Recycle Bikes. And so what we were doing is they're asking the community, if you have a bike in your garage that maybe is a bit broken or in need of repair, or you just don't use it anymore, why not donate it to us? We had like a whole team of volunteer mechanics that would overhaul these bikes, replaced any parts that needed to be fixed on them, tune them up so that they were serviceable, and then we gave them to people in the community that otherwise maybe couldn't afford a bike. And the one thing that we found really surprising was the number of people that said, thanks for this service, because without a bike, I couldn't get to my job because I don't own a car, I can't afford a car, and this is the only way I can reliably get back and forth to work. And I was shocked at how many people had said that. And, you know, when the city says, you know, like active transportation is a nice to have thing or it's a recreational thing, we're trying to change it. This is a mode of transportation. It's just as valid as driving in your car, and that some people rely on it. And you're shutting that part of the community out by not considering their needs and requirements as well.
That's a powerful story that you gave the gift of someone's freedom, realistically, to be able to live in a dignified way, to get to work, to get to job, to provide for themselves. And all they needed was a means to get there. What a powerful sign that transportation, considered at all levels, is such a vital part of a healthy community. And I mean, like talking transportation, talking about transportation downtown, active transportation, you know, you keep talking about this next economy, and how we move people around in the community is really going to have a final say on the profit of a community, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. When you think about it, if we completely forget about that segment of our community, we're really underserving their needs, and they're not contributing their full potential to the community either. So it's not a negative thing. It's a positive thing if we can provide something for them so that they can also participate and feel part of it. It makes a lot of sense. It just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, like I already said, I don't really drive, but if it's far enough, I'll take the bus. And I try to avoid applying for jobs that were like would be with the like a regular bus schedule. So it'd take me like 2 hours to get there by the bus, and then 2 hours back home. Like I try to avoid hard to get areas for jobs. I can bike, but there's obviously like a limit. I'm not going to go for like a 70-kilometer bike ride, but like one way for a job. So like, yeah, I think the mobility and the access to transportation is really important, especially like for people going into the job market who haven't had the time to like build up enough money to afford a car to go far.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right.
Well, I think we've really seen how, this next economy movement isn't just one push for North Bay. It's not a thousand things, but a bunch of different things come together for one solution for a healthier community. Mark's laughing at me for 1,000. It could be
I'm laughing at my dog because he's whining.
Oh, I thought that was a child in the background. I'm like, Mark, you got a kid. Congrats.
It's this guy.
Oh, you go. He wants to be active transportation too. He wants to go for a walk.
He does do skijoring in the winter.
Well, there you go. All right. Well, Rod, we're coming to the end of our time. I really want to thank you for sharing what you're doing in North Bay, talking about the value of active transportation, and talking about the Next Economy North Bay movement. If anyone wants to get involved in Next Economy North Bay or involved in any of the stuff we talked about, how do they reach out?
Definitely.
You're gonna have to repeat that, Rod. I think we just lost your audio.
I think we lost Rod.
Well, Rod, your audio is cutting out, so we apologize. But we were able to get the good meat of the conversation.
That's where a lot of our okay.
I think you're coming in chops, but I believe you said web page. There's a web page for Next Economy North Bay.
There's a Facebook page at this point, and we'll be developing more social media interaction so that we'll be able to interact with them. Certainly the Facebook page right now is probably the quickest and easiest way to get a hold of anybody, and if you want to share some ideas.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much, Rod. And for everyone watching, hit their Facebook page to get involved, share your ideas, and even weigh in on some of the stuff we talked about today, because an active community and a healthy community is the next community and the next economy that's ahead of us. So stay with us after this. At about 3 o'clock, we're going to be talking about net zero homes from a bio-neutrality point of view with the concept of Earthship. So thank you very much, Rod, and we'll see you next time we're in North Bay.
Thanks very much, guys. That was fun.
Take care.
Bye-bye.